Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Bomb blasts at 2 polling booths as Bangladesh votes in a high-stakes election following the 2024 ouster of longtime Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Chief of Army Staff General Waqaruzzzaman has said after casting his vote, "I urge all voters to go to polling centers and cast their votes without fear." Police say an 18-year-old woman killed her mother and a stepbrother before opening fire at her former school in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, Canada, while 9 people, including the suspect who died by suicide, are dead in one of Canada's deadliest mass shootings, while the motive is still unknown. The U.S. House votes 219 to 211 to reject President Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods, with 6 Republicans joining Democrats in a rare rebuke. The measure now moves to the Senate but faces a likely presidential veto if it reaches the White House. Russia fires drones and ballistic missiles across Ukraine overnight, targeting energy systems and injuring at least 7 people in Kyiv, Dnipro, and Odessa. Ukrainian officials say hundreds of weapons disrupt power, heating, and water as a massive attack hits buildings in the capital. President Trump says talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu produced no definitive agreement on Iran. Netanyahu says Israel's security must be protected and signals no clear U.S. commitment to expand talks beyond Iran's nuclear program. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel joins President Donald Trump's Board of Peace during talks in Washington. Images show Netanyahu signing the accession document after meeting Secretary of State Marco Rubio, confirming Israel's membership. An advisor to Iran's supreme leader says Tehran will not compromise on its missile capabilities. Amid ongoing talks with the United States, Ali Shamkhani calls the missile program non-negotiable during events marking the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. Pro-Palestinian protesters rally in Melbourne on the final day of Israeli President Isaac Herzog's visit. After clashes in Sydney and demonstrations in Canberra, protesters unite across the country as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese hosts the visit following a deadly Sydney shooting. Now for this hour, we start with Bangladesh. Counting has begun on Thursday evening in Bangladesh's pivotal 13th national election, marking the country's first parliamentary vote since the dramatic 2024 ouster of longtime Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in a Gen Z-led uprising. Polls closed at 4:30 p.m. local time, with ballot counting starting immediately across most centers. Early trends are expected around midnight, while clearer results are likely by Friday morning, according to Election Commission officials. The high-stakes contest pits 2 major coalitions, one led by the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and the other by the Islamist Jamaat-e-Islami, with opinion polls suggesting the BNP may have an edge. However, the vote has been marred by controversy. Reports of violence, crude bomb blasts, clashes at polling stations, and alleged electoral malpractices have surfaced from multiple districts. Former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, currently in exile, has termed the election a well-planned farce, citing low voter turnout and alleging intimidation, fake voting, and booth capture. She has demanded the cancellation of what she calls a voter-less, illegal, and unconstitutional election. As countries continues, the outcome is set to shape Bangladesh's political and economic trajectory in the post-Hasina era. Now for this, we welcome Dr. M.D. Habib Millat. He's a former member of Parliament and Awami League and the president of Global Center for Democratic Governance, Canada, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Dr. Millat, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, what more can you tell? Thank you. What more can you tell us about this ongoing, a facade that we are hearing the reports coming in from Bangladesh, and what have you heard so far about about the situation there?
Thank you very much. As you know that in 2024 August, the change of political landscape in Bangladesh, the interim government took over, those government was illegal and unconstitutional. And they wanted to bring a change to the country, but they failed and is a completely failed government. So they're looking for the safe exit at the moment. And that's why they have given an election on the same day for national parliamentary election and also referendum, leaving majority of the people behind the election, out of election, because of the oldest and the largest party in the country, Bangladesh Awami League, with many other parties, cannot participate in the election because of they have done an ordinance against Awami League that they are banned from political activities and suspended the registration in the election commission. So this is not going to be an acceptable election to national and international communities because of the people doesn't have the choice to vote their own party or own symbol or own candidate. And what happening over the last 3, 4, 5 weeks, I'm not talking about mob violence, extortion, killing people. That's happened, what happening during the interim government. But during the election, the number of irregularities has happened. It actually surpassed the previous election in Bangladesh. BNP, Bangladesh National Party, filed a complaint in the election commission against Jamaat with 127 irregularities. Today, the student party NCP has filed another 27 complaints. In the meantime, we have seen that buying the vote, distribution money illegally, forcing the people to go to the vote, threatening them, and telling them if they do not go for the vote, they have to take the consequences after the election. There are not many voter turnout, but I'm sure government is going to declare around 60% vote has been casted. Because of the, in the meantime, the last week, the foreign advisor Tawhid Hussain, he said that vote will be more than 55%. So they have staged the election. And the BNP probably leading the situation at the moment, but Jamaat will be close to them as well. And they will try to establish BNP and Jamaat at the same time, because these two parties worked together last 30 years and they were against Awami League. Now they are doing an election in a friendly environment that whoever goes to the power and opposition, that will be Jamaat or BNP. So there is no change in Bangladesh, which will encourage religious extremism, torture of the minorities, women and children, and also destroy regional stability.
And
so,
Doctor,
yeah.
Doctor, so as you mentioned, they were BNP and Jamaat Islami cooperated for the past decades. Is there a big difference between them about how they want to move forward when ruling Bangladesh? Also, how do you think this has affected their relationship with India? Or how would it?
Whatever happened, the relationship with India will deteriorate. This interim government tried to make, trying to destroy the stability of the 7 neighboring states. Now, as you remember, Jamaat, with the support of Pakistan, Turkey, and other countries, they are directly against India. And during the BNP Jamaat tenure in 91-96, as you remember, 10 truck firearms was rescued, and that was supposed to go to India and help the terrorists in neighboring states. And they're also trying to destabilize India because of they want to keep Pakistan and other countries happy. And also there's their political strategy. So they attract anti-Indian people in their party. So it doesn't matter who goes to the power. I'm feeling that BNP, but they will try to destabilize the seven sister in Bangladesh, in India.
And what about their relationship with US? How do you think that would change?
Dr. Yunus and his government was supported by US. In this region, the relationship depends on India-US relationship. If India-US relationship is, reasonably okay, then probably they can take decision together. But for the first few months, the way President Trump was behaving with the taxes and tariffs, although something has settled last week, but still we feel that to keep the region stabilized, there is no other option than keeping US India in same mindset. This will be a volatile area which will destroy the regional stability.
And how do you analyze, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan relationship? As you mentioned, Bangladesh and India's relationship would deteriorate no matter what. So how do you think Bangladesh would be balancing between Pakistan and India?
The present government is not trying to balance. They are inclined to Pakistan. They are bringing ISI generals, Pakistani generals to the border areas. They are have a direct communication, air communication, direct flight from Dhaka to Karachi, and that creates a great and no visa required. That's a creative environment that any extremist or terrorist can come to Dhaka. And as you know, there is a 4,200 kilometer porous border in between Bangladesh and India. So if they want to do something, the people will come to Bangladesh, they will go through those porous border, and whatever they want to do, they can do it. So for India's own stability and India's own, for India, they have to keep an eye carefully to Bangladesh. As I know Bangladesh is surrounded by India, but India has to think about that there's somebody inside them which can destabilize this seven sister. And Dr. Yunus and his other allies and students already threatened that they will destabilize, they will separate the country. They have done that, probably.
With that, I'd like to thank Dr. M.D. Habibi Millat for joining us today from London and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Thank you very much. Now we move on to NATO. NATO defense ministers gathered in Brussels for a meeting focused on European defense and ramping up support for Ukraine amid ongoing tensions with Russia. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was absent, with U.S. Undersecretary of Defense Elbridge Colby representing the U.S. This marks the second consecutive NATO meeting where a top Trump administration official has skipped attendance, following Secretary of State Marco Rubio's absence in December last year. While NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has emphasized that NATO allies are focused on strengthening security guarantees for Ukraine to facilitate a potential ceasefire.
Are only making very incremental advances. It is very incremental against high losses. In some months, up to 30,000 Russians dead. Not seriously wounded, dead. So these are incredible numbers, and it means that Ukraine is really sustaining.
Rutte has also noted that Russia's incremental advances in Ukraine are being met with high losses as the country continues to sustain its defense efforts. Meanwhile, Ukrainian Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov has expressed confidence that Russia cannot defeat Ukraine on the ground, highlighting the effectiveness of Kyiv's strategy. In addition, Colby has stressed that increased military spending by European nations and Canada would make NATO allies more equal partners within the alliance, reducing dependency on the US. He has emphasized that the future of NATO is based on partnership, not dependency. Now we welcome Ms. Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, Ms. Mutler, looking at NATO, where do they stand, and in terms of their effectiveness, as US seems to be not ignoring completely, of course, but kind of sidelining the NATO's unity, or the fact that they are also in NATO?
Under the Trump administration,
yes.
Yeah, I'm back with you.
Yes,
under the Trump administration, the US has played a more unipolar, a more unilateral role. Trump has had direct negotiations with Vladimir Putin at times, more than at times. He's appeared to side with Vladimir Putin more than Zelensky, which is a reversal of US foreign policy under Joe Biden. So while United States remains the strongest member of NATO, they're also sending a signal that they're not necessarily going to go to every single meeting. But I do see that the NATO defense ministers who are there are saying it's not a big problem. They're still the largest partner in NATO. But the European allies are very concerned about bolstering support for Ukraine so that it can defend itself from the Russian onslaught, the Russian invasion. And so I think the message is that, NATO, its members are going to go ahead with this. They are going to continue to support Ukraine because, for a start, they have a geographical interest because Europe is in the immediate vicinity of Ukraine. I mean, I'm in Romania, which directly borders Ukraine. You have Poland, the same. Germany is perhaps the biggest military partner in Europe. Then you have the UK, which again has provided a lot of support. So I think the European NATO allies are trying not to pay too much attention, let's just say, to details. The fact that the US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth wasn't there today and Marco Rubio wasn't there at a meeting of NATO foreign ministers in December. And there's no statement from the US saying we are no longer backing, we're no longer part of NATO, we're not going to participate in any meetings. So I think the European NATO allies are just getting on with their business and trying not to read too much into the US absence, which I think is something perhaps of style rather than substance at the moment. I don't think the US hasn't pulled away from NATO, but the relationship between US on the other side of the Atlantic and the European allies is being rejigged at the moment. We had Greenland earlier this year. We have the two sides have differing opinions on Ukraine, but the partnership is still there. It is just different than it was in the past.
But how dangerous is it, or how risky is it for them to undermine this? Do you think this has U.S. moving like this? Well, not just being absent in these last two discussions or when the meetings happened, but also the Greenland road that happened, and it's kind of still ongoing, and a lot of things, right? How risky is it for Europe to undermine this?
Well, yeah, we are living in uncharted. We're in uncharted territory. There is a realignment, but as we can see with Donald Trump, he can be erratic, or he can be. He is erratic. A few weeks ago, he was saying he needed to acquire Greenland, and now it seems that NATO has a strategy, a plan with the US to beef up security in Greenland and also the far north, in Iceland and Norway. So I think you can't always tell with Donald Trump. He says some things and then he comes back. Sometimes he's quite supportive of, or he appears quite supportive of Vladimir Putin, and then he'll meet Zelensky and say something else. I think generally he has a different position. But I think there is an acceptance that Europe needs to do what it needs to do. And I think Donald Trump has said in the past that Ukraine is more of Europe's responsibility because of the geographic reality, the fact that Europe is on the same continent as Ukraine, whereas the US is a long way away. So I think Donald Trump has said to Europe, you have to bear more of a burden here. I don't think Europe is going away from Donald Trump here or going away from the US. It's just doing its own business and realizing it has to pull its weight more, while in the past there was much more dependence on the US. I think, was it Mark Rutte said, we are partners. We don't need to be dependent. We need to partner. So Europe has realized it's had to step up its position. And I don't think this is hostile to Donald Trump and his administration. I think that's what he wants Europe to do. He wants Europe to play a greater role in Ukraine. He doesn't want to they do. The US supports Ukraine a lot. It's just the rhetoric has changed, and there isn't the same support guaranteed as there was in the past under Joe Biden.
So based on your answer, and also, thank you for highlighting that this NATO is a partnership, is not supposed to be a dependency under an umbrella of US. Do you think this was always the case, or is ever since US joined NATO it had become the case, dependency? And do you think this current situation with Trump administration coming, it being in charge, has shown those cracks that was always there?
Yes, what I think is that, first of all, there were decades of absolute peace in which there were no wars, basically. And then 4 years ago, we had the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is right on NATO's borders. We didn't have this before. We had the Soviet Union, and then after that, you had the collapse of the communist regimes, including Romania and Poland and the Baltic states, which were part of the Soviet Union. And that is when Vladimir Putin, the Kremlin, began to get there were tensions with NATO because NATO was coming closer to Russia's borders. And that's when things did start strains were put on the NATO alliance. But then Donald Trump, in his first term, actually told the NATO European allies, you have to increase your spending. You can't just depend on us. I mean, the US, of course, has by far the biggest military in the world, or for sure in the NATO alliance. And I think at the time it was increase your spending to 2%. Now it's to 5%. So Europeans, if you like, have been made to grow up. But I think the cracks were there. But of course, what really caused all the changes is the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, as Mark Rutte said, 30,000 Russian soldiers just died in the last few weeks or the last couple of months. It's a huge figure. And we have war. There is war on NATO's borders. Yes. But Europe are the ones who are going to have to deal with this and the overflow. And if there are more Russian hostilities, if Russian hostilities properly advance beyond Ukraine's borders.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mudler, for sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move the focus on to Pakistan. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is set to attend the first meeting of the US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace in Washington on February 19th. The board under Trump's Gaza plan was initially focused on supervising Gaza's temporary governance, but Trump later expanded its role to address global conflicts. While Pakistan's Foreign Office has confirmed that Prime Minister Sharif will be accompanied by Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar for the meeting, and many countries have approached the board with caution. Pakistan has vowed to participate in good faith, supporting the Gaza plan within the United Nations framework. Now we move on to our next news. In a major policy shift, the Trump administration has announced plans to repeal a scientific finding that greenhouse gas emissions endanger human health, effectively removing the legal basis for federal climate regulations. This marks the most sweeping climate rollback by the administration following a series of regulatory cuts and efforts to promote fossil fuel development. The move is set to impact vehicle emissions and potentially other sectors, including power plants. Meanwhile, environmental groups have strongly criticized the repeal, arguing it could harm climate efforts and create long-term legal and regulatory challenges for future administrations. Now we welcome back Ms. Alison Mutler. She's joining us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much for staying with us. Thank you. Now, Ms. Mutler, looking at this, once again, Trump administration is rolling back on something we all looked forward to or were expecting U.S. to take lead in. What are we to make of this? And do you think any other country might follow the suit?
Well, yeah, most Western nations, most nations which are part of the Paris Agreement, would want the US to play a key role. It's a massive economy, a massive country in terms of the globe. And but we all know Donald Trump's position on climate change or global warming. He calls it a hoax. And he's in favor of fossil fuels. And this rollback is not entirely unexpected, but it is a setback for efforts to tackle climate change. And it is bad news. It's bad news for people's health. So, I mean, what are we going to see? We're going to see cars run on diesel again, and no strict rules on emissions, which of course is very damaging. I mean, that's just basic common sense. If the air is choked with bad gases and things, then you'll see an increase in respiratory diseases, cardiac diseases, etc. You'll see shorter children, all kinds of health problems. But this is Donald Trump's policy, and will other nations follow him? Well, perhaps a country like Brazil will. Perhaps Argentina will. It's unclear, but yes, he is opening the door to other countries following suit, because they'll say if the US has always taken the lead on climate change and this is the current position, then we can follow suit.
Yes. With that, I'd like to thank Ms. Mutler for joining us and sharing that insight throughout. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Europe. Ukrainian skeleton racer Vladislav Heraskevich has been banned from competing in the Winter Olympics after refusing to remove a helmet that honors victims of the war with Russia. The International Olympic Committee explained that the helmet violated its athlete expression guidelines, which prohibit political gestures during competition. Heraskevich's helmet features images of Ukrainian athletes who have been killed since Russia's invasion in 2022. Despite the ban, Heraskevich remained firm in his decision to wear the headgear and expressed his pride in the gesture, while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned the IOC's move, stating it plays into the hands of aggressors and that true courage is worth more than any medal. While disqualified from competing, Heraskevich remains at the Games, continuing to show defiance and solidarity with his country. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news and updates from around the world.